Hi, welcome back to Family Art Project's Depth and Distance series. Today we're looking to nest to teach us what it means to nurture. We'll be looking to birds and insects and their ways of knowing and how to build a home to create our own small sculptures. First, I want to show you this wasp nest. This nest is made by wasps that gather fibers from dead wood and plant stems and mix them with their own saliva, their spit, to create these beautiful papery nests with complex cells inside. Wasps in this nest can organize and work together because of the structure of this nest. Animals of all kinds build nests. Birds, of course. Termites, which Ryan will share more about as he sculpts a termite nest from clay. And even animals like prairie dogs and alligators. Today we'll be looking specifically at why animals build these nests. Why do you think animals create nests? As we reflect on why animals build nests, we think about ways that animals protect and nurture and care for in their nests. And in that spirit, we're going to be creating our own from natural materials just like the animals do. We are currently at Wave Hills Compost, and we are at Wave Hills Compost here today because we are looking for herbaceous plants. Herbaceous plants are plants that are non-woody. So if we think of a woody plant, we might think of a tree or a bamboo stalk, and that basically means that it's a very strong, usually tall kind of plant that can live for a while because the structure, the system that the plant relies on is nice and hardy. It's a hardy wood. But we're looking today for herbaceous. So herbaceous means non-woody. So if we think of a non-woody stem, it would be a very flexible, soft stem, usually a bright green, because the herbaceous plants have a non-woody vascular system. So herbaceous plants are typically perennials and annuals, and they're normally plants that don't live for as long as a woody plant would. Like a tree lives for a very long time. An herbaceous plant will typically be like a perennial, which lives for about 2 years, or an annual, just the season. And so what a perfect place to find them than the compost pile here at Wave Hill, because our gardeners here always put these plants to bring them to another life. So once these plants have died back, or they've died for the season but maybe the root is still there, they bring the stem and the flowers to the compost pile where they will decompose and turn to dirt to serve another flower's growth or another plant's growth. So we're going to pick through the compost here and find plants that are herbaceous. So remember, we're looking for maybe a very bright green stem or a very flexible grass. And we're looking for those because the softer, the better to create our pulp, which we will then create into sculptures. So let's see what we can find. So you'll see here I found plenty of herbaceous plants, and I threw all of those herbaceous plants right in a pot on the stove, and I let it boil for about an hour. Then, once that was done, I threw it all in a blender and with some water, and we have now what we call pulp. So this pulp is actually what paper makers use to create paper, and we're going to be kind of replicating that process, but because we don't have all the gear that paper makers normally have, which includes what's called a mold and decal, we're kind of going to take some creative license and make our own sculptures from this pulp. So rather than use a mold and decal, which would create like very straight edges for the paper, I'm just using this window screen, and it won't create very clear edges, but I put them all in a big vat, and I put the pulp in, and I've actually included, I put in some water that I let boil with okra to give it a thicker consistency, and that's a totally optional step, but you can, if you want your pulp to bind together and kind of stay together longer, then I would suggest maybe adding that okra mixture just to give it a little more strength. And then you basically play around and you collect all the pulp on the screen. As you can see, I kind of pick at some. I just kind of collect the pulp. We're taking a lot of creative liberty here and not quite following the paper making process, just so that we can create our own sculptures. And you'll see that I also, once I have all the pulp, I kind of form it around a little round circle, and that's going to give me the base of the nest. And then later I'll go in and kind of create more of a sculpture in form. But for now, I'm just going to let it dry like that. So we're going to skip ahead onto the sculpting of the nest. I made 2 pulp bases, one more flat brown color that is made from decomposed and dried leaves, and the other green, which you saw, I kind of rounded from that circular base. So I'm going to stitch these 2 pulp structures together to create my own nest. And as I do this, I am thinking about why it is that animals build nests. So I know that birds feel an instinct to build a nest to provide care for their young. And I think of a dear friend who had been sending me pictures of a pigeon nesting on the air conditioner outside of her window while she was sheltering in place. And my friend had been sending me these pictures about a few times a week, documenting this little pigeon family and noting how 2 different pigeons were committed to keeping the eggs warm, and they would take turns. So when the eggs hatched, these baby pigeons stayed in the nest for a little while until they were ready to fly. So in addition to a nest being a place to create new life, which is what I was thinking about before, I realized a nest is also about a place that you can feel safe until you are ready to fly. So as you create your nest, what details do you want to remember about nests? Do you want to think about the complex structures of meerkat nests and how that might inspire you to think about attention to your environment? What about the ant colonies working together to build a home that sets a place for the most effective cooperation, team building? What about nests would you like to bring your own attention to in your artwork? Our last step in creating this kind of paper sculpture bird nest before we move on to learn from Ryan how to create a termite sculpture nest is the last step here is to assemble our nests and to think about what it is we're nurturing in our nests. So you'll see that I'm actually creating a base for my nest using ivy vines, and I'm just wrapping kind of the sticks together through floral wire, but you can use any kind of rope or wire or string to kind of bind some sticks together and give your nest a little resting place. And then you're going to think about what you're filling in your nest. What do you want to put in your nest? Are you thinking about what it is you are safeguarding? Are you thinking about what it is you're caring for? What will you nurture in your nest? I am nurturing breath. So I want to remember to breathe. And so I put this lichen that I found that was actually run over by a car, so it's not growing anymore. But when I see lichen, I'm reminded that the air is clean and we can breathe in fully. So I'm putting that in as a reminder to breathe fully. And I'm putting in echinacea, which is an herb that's actually really great for the lungs. And when I see echinacea, I'm so filled with joy because it's this beautiful pink flower and its petals kind of rest downward and its middle points to the sun. So the lichen and echinacea remind me to breathe. And the St. John wort seed, which I filled after in the nest after I put in some dirt, I am thinking about what's growing in my nest, what it is I'm nurturing, and how as I breathe, things grow. Things are happening even as I breathe. So that's just what I'm thinking about in my nest, and I would love to hear what you're thinking about in yours. What are you nurturing in your nest?
Hello everyone. In this part of the video, I'm going to show you how to make a malleable clay-like structure to build a nest. Specifically, I'm going to make a termite's nest. And all the items that we're using to make with this is things that you can find in your kitchen. The first thing we'll do in a pan is to pour a cup of water, a half cup of salt, 1 tablespoon cream of tartar, and just a few drops of food coloring. And I've put in a brown and pink mix to give me a terracotta clay like color. We'll stir it together to make sure it starts to mix a bit. Then we'll turn on the heat on low so it gets warm. We don't want it hot and we don't want it to boil. We just want it warm. And once you've got it warm enough, you can take it off of the burner. Then we'll pour a cup of flour. And that flour is going to start to bind everything together really well. And as you stir it, it's going to get thicker and harder to mix, but you want to stir it until it's consistently one color. And this color I'm very happy with. So now I'm going to take it out of the pot and put it on some paper so it can safely cool down just a bit. And that's our entire Play-Doh clay-like structure that we can mold and build our nest. I have a carving tool here that's going to help me break apart and carve into our clay. Early in the video, I said I'd make a termite's nest, and the reason is because I'm very interested in termites' nests. There are species of termites that build nests above and below ground, but they don't actually always live in the above ground nests. They just live underground. And many scientists to this day can't seem to figure out exactly why they build these large, massive structures that seemingly don't serve a function, or at least a function that we have identified just yet. And I find that really beautiful that termites, these small, delicate creatures, have something that they know and understand and can communicate that we haven't figured out yet. I find that really beautiful that they have this kind of secret that we're still trying to figure out. For me, this gives me a chance to appreciate the beauty of these structures and not focus too much on the technical aspects of why it exists. Just like in making art, sometimes it's not so much about the content and it's more about just admiring how beautifully and well done the work is made. And there you have it, our termite's nest. I've created a structure that's, I would describe it as quite abstract, but the fun part about this is that I can have my own reasoning for creating it, just like the termites, and you can have your own reason. That's kind of maybe a fun part about this. It can be your little secret on how and why you built the structure the way you did. So thank you again for joining me. If you want to make some art with us, share it with us on your social media by tagging Wave Hill and using the hashtag depth and distance.